Tolerators. This is To All the Men I've Tolerated Before with Natalie Katona, the show where my guest and I chat about how misogyny, I wrote it as the misogyny in my notes, and I'm like, that gave it way too much power, affects the way we interact with the world and our relationships. Today, my guest is Kate House, who is the wonderful host of Live by Design, a podcast that gives you a friendly guide into intuitive living. She is going to be talking with me about all or nothing thinking and how it related to my dating habits. Welcome to Team Tolerator, Kate.
Oh my gosh, I am so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
We just had fun without you all, Team Tolerators, by recording an episode of Kate's show. So we're already friends. I don't have to trick her like I do every other episodes where at the end I go, surprise, you're my friend now.
Yes, no, we are officially friends already.
It's already happened. That's already checked off my list. But give us a little personal background on yourself and the reason you started Live by Design.
Yeah, absolutely. So by day, I am a full-time stay-at-home mom with my 3 and 5-year-old boys. They are so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like tired a lot of the time, but it's totally worth it. I love being home with them. I'm really grateful for that opportunity. And I'm married to my college sweetheart. That was never my plan. I didn't even want to date anyone in college. And then we've been together forever. But it's great. And we live in this small town in Pennsylvania in Gettysburg. And I just love like this simple, small town, quiet life. But I always had it on my heart I have a heart for others. I
Mm-hmm.
love women, especially. I love encouraging and cheerleading other women. And for the longest time, I wanted to start a podcast and I was like kind of scared too. It like made my hands a little clammy. I got butterflies. And then out of the blue, one day, my best friend texted me and was like, I think you should start a podcast. And I was like, ah, dang it, universe. Okay.
It's so
And
funny how they'll bully us into it.
I know, right? I'm like, all right, fine. I will heed the signs. And it was so funny because I always knew that it would be called Live by Design because years and years ago, I've read this quote and I've seen it attributed to Amelia Earhart. I actually can't find out who said it, but it said to live by design and not by default.
Mm-hmm.
And that really resonated with me. And to me, living by design means waking up each day and being really purposeful with the way that you spend your time. Not that you're doing it perfectly by any means. I am a big fan of like messy action and just progress, not perfection. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, I learned at a really young age what a gift it was to be in the body that I'm in with the abilities that I have. My younger brother was a type 1 diabetic. He was nonverbal on the autism spectrum. He was dealt a really difficult hand in life. And he still showed up with so much love and so much joy and so much enthusiasm for life, even when he needed, daily insulin shots and we all learned sign language so we communicate like all these things. And he still showed up with so much joy. And so even at a really young age, he was only 18 months younger than me, I saw, wow, like what a gift that like that life is. And that I have the abilities that I have. And it's just so much easier for me than it was for him. He had to work so hard. And so that idea of living by design and not by default, I was like, I can't waste this life. Like it felt like it was a disservice to my brother to not really go all in and live my life in a way that felt really true and really good for me. And for me right now, my sense of purpose is, being a partner to my husband, being a parent to my kids, being patient and all of those kinds of things in this season with young ones. And then also nurturing other women and helping us really talk about, like we're going to talk about today, like all or nothing thinking and mindset and self-love and self-worth and all these things we're told by society, like, is frou-frou or woo-woo or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But that I actually think is really an important part of living with purpose, living by design. And so, yeah, so I started podcasting in 2020 because, that's what we did during the
Yep.
podcast or during the pandemic was like, all right, well, I can't go anywhere. So, and it started as a passion project. And then about a year in, I was like, maybe I should start the Live by Design Co. And so I started my
Mm-hmm.
company and And I just love getting to coach women and educate and hopefully encourage and inspire along the way to just get out of feeling stuck, to get
Mm-hmm.
out of those times when we feel a little overwhelmed or we feel like we're just spinning our wheels, and give people permission to live a little audaciously.
Well, I can tell you that you don't have to hope because you're doing it. It's so
Aw.
inspiring because I know that I grew up, maybe not in a household, but somehow I grew up and became an adult with a mindset that like things happen to us and then we
Mm,
live through those things that are happening to us, and that our lives are a constant reaction to the environment around us, which does a lot of us a disservice because I don't think I'm the only one who like just believes like, well, this is what today is, and you don't take
mm,
any ownership about that. And then I moved away from those mindsets and I realized I was like, oh, the one thing that I can hold on to that I've always believed is I truly believe in the power of women and how we turn the tides on people's days and people's lives and the effect that we have. So for you to be fostering that power, not only within yourself, but in other people, it means the world to me.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I love this idea of taking ownership. I like jokingly say that I had a quarter life crisis, but I was 25 and I was like having a life crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in this pattern of like people pleasing. I was in a career that I was passionate about, but it wasn't serving me well. I was really stressed and anxious and all these things. And I had this quarter life crisis and I realized like what I wasn't changing, I was choosing.
Yep.
And like you just said, like taking ownership, right? And I was like, oh, I don't have to stay at the job that's giving me like stress induced nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really eye-opening to me. Like, oh, I can choose to change this, right? And if I don't choose to change this, I'm choosing this. And if I woke
Mm-hmm.
up today with these little panic attacks, with the anxiety, with the stress, like I wouldn't choose to feel this way. Right. And there's so much power in taking that ownership. Yeah. I love that. I love that you embrace that as well.
Well, and it's also, there's that quote that says every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to three other things or whatever.
Mhm.
And when at first I thought, well, what? Number one, that makes me feel like I don't get to do all of the things that I want to do. And as a perfectionist, how dare you? I can take an hour and make it three. um, but also, I think when I changed my mindset on that quote, and it was, I have to start paying attention to the things I am saying yes to.
Mhm.
Because how many times a day do I say yes to something that I had no business saying yes to?
Yes. Yeah, I teach this course called the Pursue Your Purpose Masterclass, and we have a whole module about if it's not, can I say hell? Is
Yes,
that
you can
okay?
cuss
Okay.
all.
Okay, great.
We're dirty on
I
this
I have
podcast.
young kids, so I'm
Yes.
like always spelling out curse words. So but we say in the module, like if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
Mm-hmm.
And that allows you really easily to be like, do I want to say yes to, doing this thing that, yes, like reasonably I could do this for that other person or this commitment or whatever, but it's taking my time, it's taking my energy. Like, do I need to protect that time and that energy so that I can make my yeses super strong, right? That I
Mm-hmm.
can say, like, hell yes, that's the thing that I want to do. Instead of getting like, quote, shoulded into saying yes to things that you're like, maybe that's not really in alignment for me.
Well, and I won't generalize because my experience isn't always everyone's experience, but I think I get such a pushback on the if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no, because I have been conditioned down to the bone to not want more for myself than other people might think that I'm due, or like
Mm.
to be selfish or to be the person who has to be the center of attention, or to like I was told a lot as a kid to be more humble, to now where like I can't even hear the word and I'm like, don't you dare, I will not.
It like gives you like an eye twitch.
Yeah, like, and I've been told, like, well, couldn't you have just softened it up a little bit? Especially, that was someone's dating advice to me one day. They were like, have you ever
Mm.
thought about, like, being yourself, but, like, softer? And I'm like, what?
You're like, so not myself?
Right. They're like, like you, but like through a muffler, like through like cloth, so that person is protected against you. And I'm like, why do people have to be protected against me?
Like, thank you. Bye.
And then what ended up happening was I would be in relationships with men who resented my personality because when you own your power, people see it and they're like, I
Mhm.
want to be right next to that power. But then they also get mad because your ability to harness and use your power sometimes will reflect on how they haven't gotten to learn that yet, or like
Mm.
they're a couple of steps behind you or whatever. And I would just get blindsided in these relationships and friendships where all of a sudden people weren't into me anymore. And all I
Mm.
had done was like thrived.
Hmm. Yeah. And how did that make you feel when that would happen? Like, what was your reaction to those situations?
Oh my gosh. Part of my Christmas breakdown that I was telling you about earlier was I have been, since the start of the podcast, I have been ghosted by people who I thought were on board with this process. And it just makes you feel like, can you not have both? Can you not be a person who is living your truth and succeeding in that truth and making people uncomfortable? Because misogyny, oppression, racism, they're not easy topics to talk about, but that's also how they get to thrive because they know that we won't be talking about them. So when you get this reputation of like the woman who won't bend her expectations of how people should behave around her a little bit, and it's like, I don't know, I just asked you to not be homophobic. I guess I'm an asshole. All I asked. But I get, I'm a dick. I'm selfish and you should ghost me. So it's constantly this battle of my therapist reminding me that those people didn't actually have as big of a place in my life as they could have or should have. And that I'm always moving towards something better. But you get so lonely in it. And I
Mm.
think that's where my all or nothing um personality comes into because it's like, if I'm not the belle of the ball, then who am I?
Mm.
And if I'm not constantly having my like dance ticket filled out by all of these people who want to, make sure that I'm at their social gathering, then who am I? And what am I
Yeah.
doing? And what did I do to have these people want to distance themselves from me?
Yeah. It's such an interesting thing to consider because it sounds like to me a lot of it is we're talking about a lot of mindset work, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so for anybody who's listening and you're maybe like, okay, mindset is like this kind of hot ticket word, but like, what exactly is it? Like, I'm a big fan of like, let's define things. So, like,
Yeah.
if I were to like start this conversation about like all or nothing thinking and mindset, is that like, like when I know you wear glasses. And
Yeah.
so, like, I had LASIK years ago, so I don't wear them anymore, but I was like, I had horrible vision, like starting in first grade. I was like the first kid in my class to wear glasses, right? And every year my vision got worse. So I was always at the eye doctor, and you sit down in the chair and they put this big contraption in front of
Yeah.
your eyes and they flip between the lenses, right? And they're like, is this better or is this better? And you're like, I don't know. It all looks the same. But you have to pick the one that works best for you. And then that becomes like your new prescription. And that's what your glasses are and your contacts and all the things. And it's the lens, literally the lens through which you see the world. And your mindset is very similar to that. It's this lens through which you perceive things, you experience things, you project things. And when it comes to mindset, there's lots of different spectrums or lots of different continuums, really. There's like an abundance mindset, and on one side, there's abundance, and the other side, there's scarcity. One that I like to talk about that I think is really relevant to this conversation is like a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So, us perfectionists, like we tend to lean more towards the fixed mindset. And the fixed mindset tells us, like, I'm born with the abilities that I have, and that's what I've got to work with. And the growth mindset is like, well, that's great. But what if I could just like learn things as I go and try new things? And like with a growth mindset, you're a lot less afraid of failure. You're a lot less worried about what other people are going to say or think because you're like, there's going to be bumps along the way, and I'm just going to do it messy, and I'm going to keep on going, right? And sometimes this all or nothing thinking can kind of fall on that fixed mindset side of
Mm-hmm.
things, because we're like, well, if I can't do it perfectly, like if I can't be the belle of the ball, then I can't do it at all, right? Or
Yeah.
like, who am I without that sense of identity? And so, do you ever find yourself falling into that like all or nothing thinking, or that
Yes.
sense?
I
Yeah.
love nothing more than to create fake timelines and deadlines and expectations in my head that no one else has voiced. No one else has said, Natalie, if you RSVP no to three things, you are no longer my friend. But I am like constantly like weighing it out. Like,
Mm.
oh, I haven't talked to that person in months. There's no way they still even remember who I am as a person because I didn't do what I was supposed to do to maintain that relationship.
Mm.
When it comes to romantic relationships, it's very much like I get into this position where I get so passive and I will just like, yes, and you and whatever your agenda is and whatever it is you want to do or what our relationship looks like or what dating me looks like, to where I think that, like, well, I allowed you to form your perfect relationship with me and I just said yes to it all. Why do you have the nerve to be upset? Like, I did it
Mm.
all, and
Yeah.
then you basically told me that it still ended up being nothing to you.
Yeah. And you're like, listen, I like created this person that you told me you wanted in this relationship. And like,
Mm-hmm.
how is that not what you wanted? Because that's what I created for you. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I wonder what it would look like to go into those situations and be like, like I'm gonna be, and I hear you do this on the podcast, right? Like
Yeah.
just so unapologetically yourself. Like it's so refreshing, right? Like so many of us tiptoe around life. And I love that you have this just like, let's just like say how it is,
Yeah.
right? And I think there is this shift, because I hear you talking about like in the past, like how it felt like life was happening to you. And
Mm-hmm.
a big thing that I've learned over the years is like, especially when I go through difficult seasons, right? Like you're in a relationship and it ends and you're like, dang, like I put so much effort into that and I thought it was going somewhere and now I just feel like shitty. And I've gone through seasons this year in particular in 2022 when we're recording this. They were really hard. I lost my brother, passed away. We had a dear friend pass away in an accident. There are lots of things that happen. And it's really easy to think like this is happening to me. And I'm still searching for meaning and all of that. But the one thing that I come out of these seasons with is like, what is the lesson? Like, what can I learn? How can I carry this forward and be stronger for it, or be more resilient? Resilient is a big word for me this year. Is like, how does this make me more resilient? And so I wonder what that would look like for you to look back at some of those past relationships where you're like, wow, dude, what just happened there? Like,
Mm-hmm.
thanks for nothing. And to think about like, what are some of those, the growth mindset side is like, what are some of those lessons I can distill out
Yeah.
of this, right? Like, what can I take forward so that in the future, like, I don't have to fall into that again?
Yeah. And the podcast has offered me a really great platform to reflect and refocus and be like, you know, we all get, bungled or had or gotcha'd by instances in our own lives. And my therapist has tried to really hit home with me. I think the last time a relationship ended, I just kept saying, like, I don't understand why I don't see this coming. I do not
Mm.
understand why I do not see the resentment coming down the pike, or him being cruel, or him actually not being on board with who I am, because that's how it goes, or the narcissism of it all. And
Mm.
finally, my therapist went, have you ever thought that it's not your responsibility to guess that people are going to be cruel to you? And I went, what? No. I thought our responsibility was to assume that people were going to be cruel to us and then run away from it, but still kind of be around them, like to make it so they didn't have a reason. And she's like,
I love your therapist. I would like die to be a fly on the wall because she
yeah,
sounds amazing.
yeah. She deals with me.
Well, and that's why we love them, right? Like we
Yeah.
love that we can just go and talk and share how it is. And then they say something and you're like, oh,
Oh,
whoa.
yeah. And then I have been, oh my gosh, I'm not going to remember what it is because we talked about ASMR earlier. So that's the acronym that's in my head, but it's not ASMR. It's the therapy that you do where you're reliving a memory and your therapist is paying attention to your eye rapid movement and you're trying to re-narrate that memory to you because you took responsibility for it and it was actually someone else who dropped the ball. And it's always like such a release at the end of it where you're like, "Oh, I was the one who was also kind of let down there." Like I
Mhm.
created this giant castle and invited all of my friends to it. And they're the people who like RSVP'd no. And that's not on
Mhm.
me. It's not on me to make sure that my castle is the prettiest in town so people want to come to it.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's so true. And I think some of those lessons are things that we only learn through experience. And then we learn like, okay, well, like how can I do that differently in the future? What's like a new approach I might take? Or like, do I invite different people to this party, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how can I like structure this differently in the future? And so for you as you go forward, what is it that you're looking for in like a future partner or future relationship where you feel like you really can embrace that really like growth side of yourself?
I think something that I realized during my episode with Remy Casimir from the How Come podcast and really like diving in deeply with her podcast too is I have yet to, oh, here she comes. Hi, Penelope. I was being deep. Um, I have never been, I have never felt like the person who I was in the moment that I was in the relationship was celebrated.
Mm,
And I think that's what I'm looking for in my next friendship, relationship or whatever is for us to be able to celebrate who we are as separate individuals together and
mhm.
why that actually enhances our lives.
Yes. Oh, I love that. It's actually funny that you say that because my husband and I always joke that there's like three relationships in a relationship. There's like mine with myself and
Mhm.
him with his self, and then us as a couple. And now we have small humans that we've created. So now there's like even more
Oh, there's more.
relationships. It's just exponential. But that idea of like I can appreciate the other person and they can appreciate who I am and then we can appreciate what we have together is a lot of what I'm hearing you say of like, what if I can just really love who I am? And that's a
Mhm.
lot of what I love to talk about on Live by Design is like the self-love and the self-worth and the idea that like we are all worthy of being accepted exactly as we are and that we a lot of times like because I'm in this personal growth space for perfectionists like ourselves too, it can be so easy to see all of our quote shortcomings, like all the
Mhm.
ways we didn't achieve something or didn't change or shift or whatever. We forget to look back and be like, hot dang, like I actually grew a lot this year, or like I actually did accomplish a lot. And it can be so easy to be our own harshest critic. And I love this idea of like, what if I could celebrate who I am and the other person could also celebrate that too? I think that's so beautiful. It gives me like good goosebumps,
What if every day could be a birthday party? Like
right?
my mom used to allow us to have cake for dinner on Sundays or Friday nights. Like one night of the weekend, she'd be like, "What if we had cake for dinner?" And we only watched Toddlers and Tiaras for hours on end,
I am here for that.
or whatever was on TLC. And it's like that's kind of what I want too. It's not that I want to be unrealistic about the fact that we're going to have like boundary checks and like
Mhm.
check-ins and all of it. That is actually the part that I'm really good at, just like looking at you and being like, "I heard your tone. Do you actually want to talk to me about that?" And being shut down or closed off from the person when I do that. But it's like, what if every day could be a birthday celebration of our relationship because we're actively celebrating the other person? I find that podcasters do it the best if anyone's looking for a tip if you also need a friend to celebrate you.
Yes. Well, and, we were saying this. I think this was when we did our Live by Design conversation. They always start to blur together when we have so
Yeah.
much fun together. But that's the best part to me of being a podcaster is like, I'm like, great, Natalie's my friend now. Like,
Yeah.
and getting to cheerlead other people for me is like my favorite thing in the whole world. I will like always be that person that's like, oh, that thing didn't go as planned. That's okay. You got this.
Yeah.
Like, let's figure it out.
My sister and I, we clap for our cats and cheer them on when they're drinking water because we know that cats will easily dehydrate themselves, and then that's a vet bill. So
Uh-huh.
every time we catch our cats drinking water, we're just like, yeah, hydrate. Uh-huh. When's the last time I drank water? I don't even know.
Like, hey, I'll go drink some.
Yeah, we'll all drink water. Who are we? And then another thing that I really admire about my sister and my brother in law's relationship is that they can parallel play, meaning that like
Mm.
their lives can coexist at the same time, but maybe they're not like intermingling. Where I have been in such like anxiety ridden, anxious
Mm.
attachment style relationships where it's like, I've been told, I can't believe you're reading while I'm watching this. And I'm like, it's because I don't want to watch the football game. That is
And
why I brought my book. I came prepared for your activity.
yeah, right? Yes. I love that idea of parallel play. Actually, your listeners won't be able to see this, but I'm turning my camera. That's my husband's gaming computer back there. He's like,
Yes.
it's a big Call of Duty guy, and I can't video game to save my life. Like, I just don't enjoy them, and that's okay, right? And so sometimes we do that. We come down here. This is our basement, and I sit on my computer, and he sits on his computer, and we enjoy it. We both say we're like, it's like we're sharing the same space. We can
Yes.
like still talk to each other. Like I can celebrate when he and his squad have a win. And like, I'm like, I uploaded a podcast episode. How cool is this? We
We're
can like,
doing it.
we're doing it. Right. I love that you recognize that. Are there other things in your sister and your brother-in-law's relationship that you're like, that's something I'm interested in?
It's a parallel play for me, and it's the fact that my brother-in-law is a very sympathetic, empathetic person. He often reminds me that he is, in fact, my biggest supporter, and I allow him to have that win. And I'm like, yep, it is you. So they're very attuned to one another's feelings, and while they don't feel like it's their like responsibility to fix that person's feelings, it's like, I will take this extra step though to make sure that you feel loved in this
Mm.
house. Like if my sister has a feeling at her job, there is a good chance that my brother-in-law is buying cupcakes right now for her to be like, I went and got a cupcake though, we can't be sad on a day that there's been a cupcake.
I love that.
Another interaction that I had last night at trivia really made me think like, oh no, that's exactly the kind of interaction I should be having across the board with all people. I got to trivia and my friend and her partner were talking about something, and I cracked a joke at his expense, and his entire body, which we do all the time, and his entire body language like shut down. I was like, oh no. I go, are we mad at me? And he's like, I just gotta have a moment. I'm like, cool, I'm gonna go order my pizza. He ate because he told me, he goes, I just have to focus on eating. And I was like, okay. He ate, and when we were both kind of done eating, and in between a trivia round, I went, are we ready to make up? And he goes, I thought in my head, this isn't even about Natalie, and it's unfair that I'm going to get upset about it, but you came in hot. I go, I came in hot. He goes, so I'm sorry that I also joined in, like coming in hot. I go, well, I'm the one who pissed you off. Why are you sorry? And he goes, because at the end of the day, I knew that it had nothing to do with you, and that's not fair. And I was like, this is how every relationship, I'm not even in a relationship with you. Where were these conversations when I was sleeping with men?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, just being able to have that open dialogue and knowing that, like, I think so often, this is like a generalization, but like so often, I at least in my own experience can say that I would take on the responsibility for other people's feelings, and I would think that it was my job to
Mm,
make everybody happy, and a lot of times at my own expense, right? And it's so uplifting to be able to have those conversations with somebody, to be like, hey, I'm sorry, like I messed up. And they're like, wait, no, like let me check my reaction
Yeah.
too. Right. And well, I mean, what a beautiful, in the end, a really beautiful moment that ultimately I would imagine brought you closer.
Yeah. And then we got to play trivia and everything was fine and we had a good time. I believe I'm still invited to his birthday party next week. I don't know. Haven't checked my phone since we started recording, but he'll let me know. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things where, like you, I had to be the concierge of everyone's experience. And if White Lotus taught us anything, it's hotel people have to do everything perfectly or else the rich people yell. And you're just waiting for someone to yell because you made a misstep in their
Mhm.
feelings or their day or whatever. And instead of that person being like, why am I having this reaction towards Natalie, like my friend did last night, I would just get railed on by the men I was in relationships with because I didn't make sure that their day was sunny and 72 degrees and perfect. And I'm like,
Yeah.
mm.
It sounds to me like you've been doing a lot of this inner work of that, like finding contentment, not just contentment, but like celebration within yourself. And really, I mean, honestly, through the podcast, like you have, like, you know, your voice, you know who you are. And to me, that's a big part of shifting from that kind of fixed mindset, perfectionist tendencies, all of that. And like perfectionism can be good in some ways, right? But in other ways, it can hold us back, right? Because we're like, we're overthinking, we're overanalyzing. It keeps us kind of stuck.
Hmm.
Um, Even though it means that we produce really good work. But moving a little bit away from that fixed mindset of like, okay, I have to do everything perfectly, to this idea of like, okay, what if I can release some of that all or nothing thinking? Like, what if this is always a good example. I remember once when I was a kid, I got a 98% on a test. And one of my parents was like, instead of that's awesome, I got, well, what question did you get wrong? Right. And
Mm.
that is, I think, probably a big part of where my fixed mindset came from. My all or nothing thinking came from for a long time. I wasn't celebrating the 98% that I got correct. I thought about the 2% that I got wrong. And then I
Hmm.
was just so concerned about always avoiding that 2%, right? That I got stuck in that fixed, like, all or nothing. I either get 100% or I totally failed. And so I'd get a 98% and be like, oh, I totally suck. Like I totally failed. Right.
Yeah.
And now moving towards that idea of like, okay, well, what if I get the equivalent of like an 85% on something, right? Like I'm not in school anymore, but that's really awesome. Like 85 out of 100 things you did well, that's amazing. Like let's celebrate how far we've come. And it seems to me you've done a lot of this inner work, and you're doing a lot of this, like those shifts towards like self-love and
Hmm.
self-worth. And I am a big believer that like what we put out there into the world gets reflected back to us. And so I'm really excited that we're friends now, because I'm going to be like,
Yes.
so Natalie, like who has the universe reflected back to you?
I have a quote for you then. My friend told it to me. It was in a conversation where someone was just like dumping a lot about their very negative day onto me. And it was like the fourth day in a row of that week. And my friend said, you should tell her what's watered will grow. And now it sits on a post it note on my desk. I meant to turn it into an art piece. And then I quickly became just like distracted by other things. But it is still a post it note that just sits there next to my abundance altar on my desk where I can be like, no, like if you're working towards it, it will grow.
Mhm.
I opened our last conversation by telling you I'm very jealous of your beautiful plants because plants die in my home. So maybe I could do a better job watering actual plants, but we also talked about how it's a light issue.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the last home that we lived in, I couldn't keep a plant alive to save my life or the plants. And I even bought like plant lights, like
Yep.
nothing worked. And now I just have sunlight, and it makes all the difference. But you're absolutely right. I mean, what you water grows. And that's so much of life really that I'm learning is like, sure, I can focus on all the things that are hard and challenging in my life, or all the things that I feel like happen to me.
Hmm.
But what if I focused on the ways that it happened for me? How
Yeah.
did I become stronger, more resilient, more self-sufficient, more courageous, and ultimately maybe more confident in the end through taking like courageous action. How did it happen for me?
Yeah, I love that. Maybe I'll write that up here right next to what's watered will grow. How did that happen for me? Um, how do you believe that our society, with a kind of focus on misogyny or other oppressive systems, how do you think that
Mm.
that allowed you and I to fall into all or nothing thinking patterns?
I think for me, at least, when it came to all or nothing thinking, I felt like my worth was weighed in as a kid, at least, right? Like in my good grades.
Mm-hmm.
In I was raised in like a religious household. I am not religious
No.
anymore. I had a very bad experience, but at that time, it was like how many people told my family member that day that like I did well in Bible school, or
Mm-hmm.
like I got an A+ on my test, or I am putting the needs of everyone else before my own. And I think that there's this system that keeps us quiet, that keeps us subservient, that keeps us focused on putting everyone else before ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to the end of the day and we're exhausted, and we've taken care of our kids and our partners and our pets, even. And like, we get to the end of the day and we've got nothing left. And
Yeah.
so, like, how are you going to stand up and speak your truth? Or how are you going to fight these oppressive systems if you're like, I am barely treading water and some
Mm-hmm.
days I feel like I'm drowning, right? Because
Right.
you're trying to be perfect for everybody. And so I think it comes from a lot of places, and it's kind of this like, I hate to say like holistic, but it's like it can kind of be all encompassing, right? There's this idea of like, well, you have to work out to look a certain way so that
Mm-hmm.
that was a big one for me too, is like, well, you have value as a woman if you look a certain way for someone else. And I had to have a realization as a young adult of like, and continually remind myself, like, no, like I love my body for all of the incredible things that it's done. It's gotten me through 33 years of life. It's gotten me through half marathons. It's like, held hands of like the people I love, right? I don't have worth because somebody else finds my outer being attractive, right?
Yeah.
Like, but there's so much you have to unpack there to be like, no, I have worth exactly as I am, right? And I'm not going to let, the front of the magazine cover at the grocery store tell me that like I don't have a six-pack abs. And so like I'm not worthy,
Right.
right? Like I was born in 89. Like I like the magazines at the time, right? And so I think it's all of these things. For me at least, it was the religious connotation, and the man is the household, and
Mm-hmm.
all of that, and like that got rewritten in our wedding vows. And like, because we have a partnership, this
Yeah.
like there is no one head of our family, right? And so I think it comes from all these different areas. And for me, I think that's why it's so important for the work that you do, the work that I do. Like, we both are working, I think, actually towards very similar end goals, and we
Mm-hmm.
go about it in different ways. But that's what's beautiful about life, is like we have unique gifts and we can
Yeah.
lean into that. And I think by you bringing light to these stories, right, to all the men you've tolerated before, and bringing on guests to share their stories and their experiences, like you dismantle things in one way. And then if I'm over in this other corner and I'm empowering women to be like, yeah, no, you're worthy and you are
Mm-hmm.
worthy of self-love and asking for the salary you deserve. And like, it's so fun in my coaching practice because like sometimes like we start with health, but it's
Yeah.
always about everything else. It's like the relationships, it's the career fulfillment, it's all these other things, right? But we always think it's health, and then it's actually a lot deeper than
Yeah.
that. So long story short, I think it comes from a lot of different ways. And I think it's so important in the work that you do. And champions of women, I think women championing other women. I actually have something, speaking of what's up on your walls, I have one that says empowered women empower
Yeah.
women. And I show up every day and I sit down at my computer, and that's what I look at. I'm like, empowered women empower women.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I can just encourage one listener if I can encourage one person on my email list or in my Facebook group to stand up for themselves and to not be like a doormat of their
Mm-hmm.
life, and to instead be like, nope, I'm going to take some ownership. I'm going to live by design and not by default, then it's all worth it.
And I think one of the beautiful things that you foster in who you're coaching and the listeners of your podcast is a sense of agency. And I do think that we live still in a world where women aren't made to feel like they have a lot of agency.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think was the most detrimental to my all or nothing thinking was how everything was made to feel like forever. If you got a bad grade or a series of bad grades or you did bad in a class, like that's forever. That affects, your skills in high school, and your skills in high school affect if you'll go to a good college, which
Mm-hmm.
affects your job. And then once you get that job, we very much watched our parents have jobs that they were like at forever. Like, no, this is
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't care if I like my boss. I don't care if the work means anything to me. Like, you just get a job because you have to get a job. And then they're supposed to give you bonuses and like great health care and whatnot. And our generation didn't have that. Like,
Yeah.
we're like, no, they won't give me a Christmas bonus. I asked.
And
But
then there was a pandemic.
yeah, and then there was a pandemic, and then relationships too. Like, I was very much taught that the only way to live my life was to graduate high school with a great GPA, take that great
Mm-hmm.
GPA to a college, leave college with a job and a husband, and then like that person is also forever with me until the end of time. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I was 22, my parents' marriage fell apart. And I was like, what about that forever word that you've been stressing me out about? Like, and that
Yeah.
honestly was a really tough time for my family. But I think it also played a role in how I got brave enough to do to all the men I've tolerated before. Because if my mom can release herself from forever, I too can release myself from the idea
Mm-hmm.
of forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much of what you just described was what led to my quarter life crisis. Cause I had this moment of like, I mean, I was like sixth grade
Mm-hmm.
valedictorian, right? And then I had like great grades in high school and I went to a good college and I like had the job I quote was supposed to have. Like everyone was like, she's doing the thing. This is great. And I was like, but I'm miserable. And like, it's not their responsibility to make me happy. Like, I just don't flourish in this environment. And like, I became a yoga teacher and I had to have this moment of like, well, like, who's all my college education for? I could have done this like 5 years ago or whatever,
Uh-huh.
but you don't know what you don't know. And I think a big thing of what you're saying is like, we get these self-limiting beliefs, and they're so hard to shake and they're so hard to dismantle. And sometimes you have to have those moments. Like I had the quarter life crisis. Like I have a very vivid memory of like sitting on my couch and bawling and my
Mm-hmm.
husband sitting there and being like, I wish I could make this better for you, but I can't. And that was my
Yeah.
moment of like, oh, I have agency in my life and I have to use it. And it sounds like to me, like in that season when your parents split, you had that moment of like, oh, this self-limiting belief that's been put on me in a way of like things have to be for forever. Like I can choose that, or I can like choose to release that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's so much abundance in realizing like, oh, I have agency and I can create awareness around these assumptions I have about myself or about life, and decide like maybe that's not true for me anymore. Maybe I can
Yeah.
go in a new direction.
And I think, I mean, speak of religious trauma, and we have on an episode before, but when I was teaching at Catholics, at my first teaching job, it was in a Catholic school, and I had to dedicate the entire month of May to the Virgin Mary and like watch little girls be in white dresses and tell them like, well, you have to be pure and you have to be perfect, and then if you wake up knocked up by an angel one day, you also have to just blindly accept that is your life, and you didn't even get to like have fun about it. You literally just woke up impregnated by an angel.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. I mean, I could do like a whole episode on religious trauma, but like it's wild. I actually took an entire program last year at this time, with these two women who they used to be pastors, like
Mm-hmm.
they were really in it. And they both woke up and realized like had their own awakenings, like, oh, this isn't like, they started asking more questions. They realized like, okay, this isn't the system of belief that I want to be in. And so they help other like ex-religious women like deprogram is literally the word that we
Mm-hmm.
used. And I didn't even realize that I needed that until I started connecting with them. And they've been guests on my show because I'm like, teach me more, right? And then I
Yeah.
did their coaching program, and it was so helpful to realize like how much of that, I mean, speaking of like like the way it's systemic, is like so much of what was holding me back or making me feel stuck or not enough had been ingrained so long ago that you don't even have the awareness that it's there or it's optional. Like you just think
Yeah.
like this is it. And yeah.
One of the movies that we covered on Still Comfy, the live stream I was telling you about, on Monday we covered Love Actually for the holiday season. And I was very adamant that like none of the relationships in the Love Actually movie should have actually happened because none of the women in Love Actually had agency in how those men were treating them. Like you think of
Mm.
Alan Rickman having the nerve to want to cheat on Emma Thompson, and I can't think about it.
I know. It makes me like hot angry. Like I see red.
Yeah, I'm like, Emma Thompson, are you kidding me? Like, do you remember what your hair looked like in all of the Harry Potter movies? You want to cheat on Emma Thompson. And then Colin Firth, like falling in love with a woman who can't even communicate with him and then convincing her that that's a good thing. Some dude showing up on your porch with cue cards and being like, I know that I haven't fostered a relationship with you at all since you've been dating my buddy, but it's because I'm obsessed with you. So carry that, won't you? And it's just like,
Yeah.
in my mind, you ask me like in my next relationship, what do I want? And I want agency in the way that I get to fall in love. I think we've been conditioned to believe that like one day you just wake up, you're in the right place at the right time, and a man just walks up to you with a cue card and goes, it's you. I'm in love with you. I can't tell you why. I can't tell you how. It's just happened.
Yeah. Surprise.
Surprise. Today is
Yeah.
your day. You have been chosen.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I find that like, because like I went to school and I actually was very much like I had just come out of like leaving the church and religion and all
Mm-hmm.
of that, and I was like, I am not dating in college, or if I do, it's just for fun. Like I'm not going to date anyone
Yeah.
seriously. And it was so funny because for me, my experience was that it was when I wasn't looking for it and when I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I'm just gonna like enjoy my life, I'm gonna like lean into the things that I'm passionate about. Then like I met Dennis and was like, oh, I'm like actually really into you. But like I wasn't even looking for anything serious, right? And so it's so funny how like how we think it's supposed to happen, right? Like we
Yeah.
think that person's supposed to show up and be like, I've been waiting for you forever, or like, I don't, it's life is funny like that. And I think we just have to like let go of all these ideas of like what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Because it's
And
very tricky when you do feel chosen by a man who just wants to fuck around and find out. So then I had to start a podcast to let all of my exes know that I wasn't that into you either. I was playing Love Actually in my head.
oh my goodness. I'm really excited to see where all of this work that you're doing. The cool thing about your show, I think, is that not only are you empowering others and lifting other voices up by through your guests and empowering people who are listening and creating this incredible community of people, but I would imagine that there is a lot of inner work that
Mm-hmm.
happens as a result of it too. And so I'm really excited to like follow along on your journey and get to be your friend and find out like where does this lead, right? Like, how do all these inner shifts that are happening, like, what does that bring to fruition in the future?
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, as a practicing witch, I have thrown shadow work out the door because I'm like, I do that publicly online. I don't have to light a candle or write anything down. I literally put it on the internet.
It's all out there.
It's all out there. We have two traditions onto all the men I've tolerated before to wrap up. We have to like give everyone an overarching lesson that we wish that they would take with them as they move on. And we also have to manifest for a better future and a general better energy for the universe. So if you could wrap up what you wanted people to carry with them when it comes to fighting all or nothing thinking, what would you want them to like have cross stitched on their pillow?
Oh my gosh. Like if I had to, especially if I were like talking to like one particular listener or even myself like 10 years ago, I
Mm-hmm.
would say like, you are so worthy exactly as you are. And you can let go of all the expectations and the worries and all of the weight that you carry. And you can just know that you are worthy right now in this moment as you are, and that you can love yourself
Yeah.
in whatever messy, hard season you're in, and that you are perfect right now.
I don't know if you're a TikTok fan, but Elise Myers had that very video on today where she was like begging us, like, as you go into making your New Year's resolutions, allow yourself the freedom to love yourself for whoever you were this year, too.
Yes. No, that's so funny. I'm not on TikTok, so that's hilarious. So we must be like channeling
Yes.
something similar. I know I always just like to think like, what if you're not broken? You
Yeah.
know, like what if we're all on this growth and learning journey, but that you don't have to start from assuming that you're broken, you know?
No.
And so yeah, that would be my wrap up is like you are worthy, and you can let go of all those expectations of other people that make you end up in this all or nothing thinking, and give yourself permission to do it messy and to do it scared and to just keep showing up day after day after day with like love for yourself, and see where that goes.
I love that. And I think I would tell people that when you give yourself the gift of agency over your own life, it doesn't have to be all or nothing thinking
Mm.
because you're setting the expectations every day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I still love to believe that I'm going to get 22 things done in a day and then go, I guess I really meant four, but that's okay. Because I gave myself the agency to take a nap if I needed to take a nap and give up some of those hours. Time is a icky construct. Like we feel like we put the scarcity mindset on time and then time became currency and all of it. But if you have the agency to be like, but this is what I'm prioritizing with that time, then it kind of just does fall away and you're allowed to yourself that room to not meet expectation.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful.
And then what would you hope for everyone moving forward?
You know, it's funny that this is how you close your show, because at the end of my show, I always invite people to spread some joy
Mm-hmm.
and make someone smile. And I think if we can all just go throughout our day and just be a little kinder to others, you know,
Yeah.
like wait a second longer and hold the door open for the person that's hurrying into the Starbucks behind you, you know, like those little things. Like, I think that we can feel joyful by creating joy and happiness for others. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's in, I think we hear joy and we think it's this really big word, but I actually think it's really small. I think it's in these quiet little moments, or the time that you take to just be courteous or nice to somebody else when they aren't expecting it. So that would be like what I hope people could manifest, is to just like spread a little bit of that self-worth and that self-love you now feel with
Mm-hmm.
somebody else, and give them
Yeah.
permission to feel that too.
Because what are we doing it all for if it's not to actually, because I can't hold on to all of my joy and then expect the world to be joyful or continue to be joyful. Bezos,
Right.
I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
You can't hold on to all of that monetary joy and then expect the world to just catch up with you.
Yes, exactly right. I think joy is one of those things like you spread it to one person and then they spread it to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and then it can just keep going exponentially.
And then I think my hope for everyone is that every person, at least, and especially women in our Women Plus community and anyone who is the brunt end of a oppressive society, I hope that at least one day you go, but actually, I wanted, and then you fill in the blank. And then you at least advocate and say out loud what it is that you actually wanted in that moment.
Yes. Oh, I love that. There's so much agency in
Yeah.
both of your answers. It's
Ag-
really empowering. Yeah.
Agency is a big word for me this week. I believe like it was kismet to do Love Actually and your recordings today because it's just at the forefront of my mind where it's like, I love to be in control, but to be in healthy control means that I recognize my own agency.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I want to like snap for you. Like, yes.
ASMR. um, Make sure. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm so glad that we took these hours to just cement our friendship and plans to celebrate one another and everything. You and
Oh
this
my
goes
gosh.
with
I am so excited. I'm already like, can't wait to stay connected.
yes. And this goes without saying, you are always allowed back to rail against the machine that is misogyny. In fact, we had such a great time on our season 2 finale where I had a roundtable of past guests talk about women's safety that I would love for past guests to also want to revisit topics that we've already covered, maybe in a one-on-one setting with a group, and like just continue to build connections with the people who are fighting against these ideas.
Oh my God. I'm so in.
Yes, awesome. So make sure that Team Tolerator knows all of the ways that they can connect with you.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. I had so much fun with you. I can't wait to stay connected. But yeah, so you can find me on all the podcasting platforms over at the Live by Design podcast with Kate House, just like a house, House. And I'm over on Instagram at Miss Kate House, because I guess there's another Kate House out there. So I'm MS Kate House over on Instagram. And if you ever want to be in community with others who are choosing to live with purpose and intention, really a primarily women's focused community, then over and in my Facebook group, you're welcome to join us over at misskatehouse.com/community. And then you'll be automatically forwarded over to our Facebook group. It's totally free, but it's a great place just to be with other people who are choosing to live by design and not by default.
Listen, I know that people are like, Facebook's on the out, but it is the easiest way to talk to strangers online. To just
Yes.
like continuously meet strangers online who also like cross stitching or a podcast that you're listening to. It's still Facebook.
Or
It's
cross stitching while listening to a podcast.
yes, exactly. There's a Facebook group for everything. And tolerators, you know the deal. It's Men I've Tolerated Pod that has the link tree. Make sure you're joining us on Patreon because the bonus episodes are literally just we put aside all of the like misogyny and the format of the show, and we just have a phone conversation with one of your favorite guests who I'm lucky enough to call a friend. 5-star reviews and comments about why you like the podcast always are a great free way to help out. And remember, tolerators, you don't have to smile through anything that you are tolerating, including the anxious attachment that we have to perfection. Smiles are for joy. Hi, everyone. Thank you for checking out this week's episode. I wanted to jump on and offer a small reminder of the ways that you can connect with us. The first way is our socials. So we are Men I've Tolerated Pod on Instagram and Natalie K124 on TikTok, my personal Instagram. And you can find us on YouTube and Pinterest under To All the Men I've Tolerated Before. The second way is by becoming a Patreon member. We are well on our way to our 25 member Patreon, where we are going to unlock bonus perks to being a patron member. Shout out to all of our existing patrons. As an independently ran and funded podcast, your support means everything. Another way that you can connect with us is making sure to subscribe and leave comments wherever you can so we can start reading reviews on each podcast episode. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure to check out the merch store, and we will see you next week.